Bonjour and welcome into the cave. My guest band brings me back to what I consider is one of the best post-hardcore eras, around 2010, with bands like Departure, where their names come from, Landscapes, More Than Life. They just released their album Nothing Is the Same Anymore, which is as personal as socially aware, which is my favorite kind of combo. Rob of Death of Youth is here with me today. Hi, Rob.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. As I was saying, you've just released your new album, Nothing Is the Same Anymore. Can you a bit walk me through the process of bringing this album to life?
Okay, so kind of had to go back to the start of Death of You because it started out as a bedroom project of mine back in 2018. So I was basically just writing, not recording because I was going to a friend to record, but I was writing, recording and releasing by myself. And then I kind of put that on hold in 2022 to focus on other things. So a lot of other stuff going on. And then in 2024, kind of started the ball rolling of kind of bringing it back, but not as just a bedroom project. It's going to be a full band. It's just going to be a one-off show to give myself some closure and say I got to play these songs live. And then kind of went back to songs that I had written but not used, was to start playing around with new ideas. And it just became an idea of like, let's do this properly. Made this a full band. Let's write an album and let's record it and see where things go from there. And so yeah, we entered the studio February 2025. We didn't finish it then. We had to get an extra day in April to finish up, but we did the bulk of it in that February. And that was the whole process of seeing like the songs come to life from the ideas I had. Mostly a fluid process, bumps in the road, but that kind of helps the album become what it is and makes you proud of it, having overcome the minor obstacles along the way.
Like what type of obstacles?
Without throwing anyone under the bus or kicking off some drama. The big thing in the studio was we realized our bassist at the time was not on the same page as us. They had other commitments and things, and it wasn't working for us as a band because it meant it was harder for us to make commitments for gigs or for like things like press photo shoots, music video shoots. And obviously it wasn't working for them because this was just another commitment they had to try and squeeze into amongst everything else they had going on. So we had to make the tough decision to kind of go our separate ways because it just wasn't going to work having them in the band, and it'll allow them to focus on the other things they had going on. Because the bass was one of the things we didn't end up finishing in the initial February time. We had to then get someone else in to play the bass. It did mean we had to retrack everything. Yeah, that was probably the biggest obstacle we had in terms of recording the album. I think we had another minor one at the start where we had two producers on the album, and one of the producers was supposed to set up our guitars while we were tracking drums because he's like a wizard with like guitar maintenance stuff. And then literally the day before we were due to go into the studio to record drums, his dog died, which is obviously very unfortunate. And he had to take those first 2 days off to kind of process that, which is completely understandable. But it did mean we did have to wait for him to properly start on guitars because Joe, our guitarist, his guitar was quite new, so didn't need a lot of fine tuning. Whereas my guitar is I'd had it about a decade at that point, and there was a fair bit of maintenance that needed doing on it, mainly to like fix the intonation because the tuning was just a tiny bit off, even though like we were like tuning it and it was saying it's in tune, but like it just like the intonation was just a tiny bit off, and we had to get him in when we came back in the studio after the drums were edited to punch it. And that did slow us down a little bit, but not as significantly as the other issue did.
At least it's good that you realized it while in the studio rather than being on tour or having all of those commitments and having shows planned.
Yeah, that was the other big thing because we had a gig booked at the start of April, and because it was a regular thing of they would say they could make it to the recording or practice, and then last minute it'd be like, no, I've got this going on. It'd be like, what if that was a gig well, if that happens at this gig, we've got booked. So we had to make a really tough decision there.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it works in the long run because now we're with our current bassist, Carlos. He's very much on the same page as us. Like, we all like the same kind of music, which really helps. And he's adding a lot of ideas, not just to the new songs, but to the old songs. Like, he's added like his own like takes on the songs and the bass parts. And it's just really great having him in the band. So all things work out for the best, I guess.
Have you played some of the songs of the album during the shows, and what was the feedback, if you have?
So we made a decision to cut back on the album stuff, at least until we'd released it, because we didn't want to have it where we've played the whole album live and people have already heard all the songs by the time it's released. So we were very, very meticulous about which songs we started to play live. Like, we started playing, I think, 2 songs. We did So Nothing's the Same Anymore, which was the second single. That was like one song that everyone in the band was like, yeah, this is like one of the best songs on the album, or like a personal favorite of ours. So that was a very easy pick. And then we put on The Inverse of Patriotism because it's like a really fun, fast kind of hardcore song. So we had that song in there. And then when we released the next single, the first single, Fix Your Heart or Die, we started putting that in the set list. I think we timed it because we played a benefit show for a trans activist group called Punks for Transsexualism. And because the song was about trans rights, we wanted to time it. So the first time we played that song was at that gig, and we released it just after that. Yeah, by the time this episode goes up, the album will be out and we'd have done the release show. But as we're talking now, we haven't done it yet. But at the release show, the plan is to play the album in full. And that will be the first time we play most of the songs live, and also the first time most people will hear them.
You must be excited about it.
Yeah, it's very exciting, because it was also exciting having it finished over the summer, because then it was like this thing that we were really happy of, but it was also kind of like our secret. And now it's going to be available for anyone to stumble across. And I'm just really excited for people to hear what we've been working on. And it just feels crazy to me that it's like, at the time we're having a conversation, we're just under 2 weeks out from releasing, which is insane to me. It's like the clock is ticking for people to hear it.
I've listened to it and I really, really enjoyed it, whether it is just
to
the
hear it.
music or the lyrics. So congrats on this album.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we mentioned the song Nothing Is the Same Anymore, which is actually the first song you wanted to talk about. And especially with the line, an unfamiliar story with an all too familiar ending. So can you tell me why you chose this song and this line?
Okay, so this song is a personal favorite of mine on the album. I think it's like one of the first songs I had, and it was one of those ones that is always just like, that's always going to be on the album. Lyrically, it came a bit later, because I had some songs written a few years before, and this was one of them. And then I wrote all the lyrics around the same time. I had like a pretty rough breakup about a year or so beforehand. And this was one of the songs I wrote about that, because it was like, I've been through it was such a big thing for me, both the relationship and healing from it, that I wanted some kind of art reflecting that. And I was not sure what that was going to look like until I started doing Death of Youth again. And this song just felt like a no-brainer to have these lyrics about. And it made me like the song that much more. The line I chose in particular is kind of because what it means is it was a breakup, which is something I've been through before, but this time I found it a lot more challenging to come to terms with and move on from due to the circumstances of the breakup, because this wasn't a case of like personalities clashing and things just not working out. This is a case of like two people who really got on incredibly well, and then suddenly some circumstances played their hand, and it led to us having to go our separate ways, which I understood given the circumstances, but it was a lot to process, a lot to take in, given the unexpected nature of how it came about, and which is where the unfamiliar story part comes in, because it's not something I'd experienced before, but is something new but something old at the same time. And so it's kind of like, it's also like the whole thing of like grief is different every time you experience it.
Especially when it's not, when you're just falling out of love, can be the hardest, because I guess you can also always wondering, what if?
Yeah, there's another song on the album called Rumination, which kind of is more about that part of it, which is me kind of wondering, what if the circumstances that played their hand didn't play their hand, and I'm wondering if they're thinking the same thing. That was the gist of that song. But whereas Nothing's the Same or is kind of not so much about the relationship itself, more about the journey I've been through, like trying to heal from that. Because at the time it was a year out, and I was still kind of mulling over it, still thinking about it. But it was also like kind of looking like, look at where I was when the break first happened. Look at where I am now, which is where kind of the process of writing the lyrics came from. It was like a song kind of more about like healing and looking at where you currently are in that healing process and looking at how far you've come. It's not more about complete healing, but just accepting where you are.
And what was your healing process like? Did it feel like going through the 5 stages of grief?
It was very, very fluctuating in terms of like, I mean, I experienced the stages of grief in this. I think part of that's probably because I'm autistic, so the way I experience things is different to how a neurotypical person would experience it, for example. But so I think the main one I feel is just like the depression, I guess, is the emptiness, and just I think the first thing is you get the denial, which is just like is this happening? Am I okay? It's very very confusing. Anger can kind of come and go. I think that's possibly from just being overwhelmed. Bargaining's a weird one. That's one I don't really tend to experience while I'm going through the process. And then I think it took a long time to accept. I think the thing that I think I had to do to get that acceptance was therapy, which is something I'd never really done before. But it was one of those things that I kind of just thought it was like, this is a relatively minor thing. Does it really warrant? It took me a while to realize how much I really was struggling. As much as I thought I was doing okay, I really wasn't. And it did lead to me thinking, okay, maybe I need to have some kind of counseling. I had 2 different like counselors over, I think, months apart from each other. I had one set through my work. My workplace has a kind of like an employee assistance program. So if anyone's struggling, they can get in touch with them and they can kind of give you like a short form kind of counseling, which is what I got like 6 weeks of free counseling from that. And then the local area I was living at the time also had like an affordable therapy service, which months on, I realized I was still struggling, and I went for that. And that was probably the one that helped me the most in terms of not so much about the acceptance. That was more kind of getting me in a place where I was able to cope and move forward a bit more, rather than this being stuck in this situation and still mulling over it. So I think at the time I was struggling to see what was next on the horizon for me. I didn't know where things were, because I've always struggled with uncertainty, but this was like a big pile of uncertainty that I was not in a place where I could process, at least not without help.
You were saying that you were thinking that this could be minor, but yeah, therapy can be used by anyone, because we all have things that we need to process. And that doesn't mean that after one session we will be healed, but at least it's a good way to have our emotions out, to express them to someone
that
neutral.
Was the thing. I think what I needed at the time, I think it was I just needed to talk to someone completely neutral in that situation, who wasn't going to give me like the easy answers that I wanted to hear. And it's also like, they're not really just healing you. They are guiding you on that process and finding something that works for you.
Besides therapy, are there other things that helped you?
Just delving into the things that like I'm interested in. Like, outside of music, I'm a big like movie lover. Like, I love going to the cinema. I go to cinema quite regularly. So that I think just going to see films and just spending time by myself, I think that was something that was helpful. And then one thing I think that helped me level out a bit more was I started bouldering. And I think that was one of those things where it just helped me just focus, even though it's quite a high pressure sport, because bouldering is basically rock climbing, but without a harness. It's not as quite high up as like a big wall, but it's like still like 4 foot up. But so obviously it's quite, for quite a high pressure sport, it can feel quite like calming doing it. So that was, I think, about a year on from the breakup when I discovered that, and it was something that I think it helped me feel like very much in the zone.
Yeah, I guess keeping your mind busy, also off of it. So you had a good balance between expressing your emotions while you were in your therapy sessions, and at the same time, keeping your mind busy doing other things. And also just staying in movement is also very important when we don't feel very well, because it's very counterintuitive sometimes to get out and do things when you just want to stay in bed.
Exactly. I mean, I'm one of those people.
But yeah.
I cannot be in bed like later than like 9 o'clock, 9:30. If I'm like out of bed later than 10 o'clock, I feel like I've wasted my day. I'm like one of those people. So if every now and again, on occasion, I will just have a lie in a bit longer. But even on the weekends, I just can't sleep in. If it'll get to like 9 o'clock, and I'll be like, I have to be out of bed now.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same, but I just switch sometimes from the bed to the couch. So in the end, it doesn't change much. But I guess you're better than me on that.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Once I am up and about, if I've not got any plans, I will just be on sitting in front of my TV, watching something or playing a game. But I do try and have a balance between that and finding other things to do.
And during that part, so during that whole healing process, what was the hardest part for you?
I think I said earlier, was the uncertainty and not knowing what comes next. At the time, I was 29 years old, and as someone on the spectrum, it is hard to find people you connect with. And this was like the first time I had connected with someone on such a level that felt like, because one of those things where it wasn't like the same kind of intensity I had in other relationships. This was like one thing where it just felt really calm and at ease in spite of feeling like such strong, intense feelings for another person. And then suddenly that went away, and it was like, well, now what? What happens now? How am I going to ever recover from this? Will I ever find someone else who I do connect with in that way again? And sometimes that does play on my mind, even to this day. I am still healing to some degree, but not at the extent I was about 3 years ago when this journey started.
The song ends with, I'm sure
Yes.
I'll be fine. So which gives a bit of hope. Is it something that you always kept? Like this hope that eventually you will be okay?
I think that's one of the things that did keep me going, was knowing that no matter what, I'll be okay. Because even if this was a tough situation, I had been through breakups before and come out the other end. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I knew eventually I would be okay. Which then that's the kind of note I wanted to end the song on, of like, I'm not currently okay. I'm not fully okay. I still kind of feel the weight of what I'd been through, but having come as far as I've come, I'm going to be okay eventually, which is what the whole point that last kind of verse of the song was. And that's why I said, I can't pretend I don't still feel the weight of my scars. Which is another line in that song. Is like, I mean, acknowledging that I'm still not fully there. I still feel the weight of everything, but I'm getting there.
And do you feel like you've gotten there?
At most, I'm probably 90% there, because as I've said earlier, it does still play on my mind from time to time, but it is a lot smooth, a lot less bumpy than it was like at the start, or even when I wrote the song.
This is a good transition to the second song and line that you wanted to talk about, which is from the band Thursday, and the song Tomorrow I'll Be You, and especially with the line, I will change back to myself in the flame. So before we talk about the line, I just wanted to check why you chose Thursday. Is Thursday also a big influence in your album? Are there other influences in your new album?
So Thursday are one of my absolute favorite bands of all time. My entry point into this kind of music was as like that scene of post-hardcore bands like Funeral for a Friend, Thursday, Thrice, etc., etc. Those kind of bands were the reason why I'm into this kind of music. Definitely, there is that kind of influence throughout the album of that era. Every now and again, there is kind of things that do sound like. The thing, particularly the song "Bystander," that definitely does have parts that remind me of Thursday more than any other song on the album. I'd say probably musically, I was drawing more from like bands like Touche Amore, La Dispute, Piano's Become the Thief, Defeater, as well as a lot of like UK bands doing a similar kind of thing about 10 years ago, like Departures, Modern Life, Veils, Good Time Boys. And
Mhm.
so those are probably the main influences. But obviously, as I grew up on bands like Thursday, bits and pieces are bound to creep in that have that kind of sound.
Yeah, only very good influences here. Coming back to the line, so why did you choose this line?
My thinking point for this, well, because I didn't want to just talk about my lyrics. I wanted to talk about the lyrics of someone who I admire, and I was trying to think about lyricists that I could talk about because
Mhm.
a lot of lyrics I like are just like lyrics that I like because they're very very relatable, not super poetic. And then I was thinking Jeff's got some really good lyrics. I'm like Jeff Roderick is one of my absolute favorite lyricists, so I thought that's why I thought
Mhm.
some kind of Thursday lyric would be, and I was kind of had to think about the different lines of the songs. And this line from Tomorrow I'll Be You, which is off like my favorite Thursday record, War All the Time. I remember reading those lyrics, and I think also coming across Jeff's explanation for what the song was about, which is about kind of like going through hardship and then coming out the other end. And that line kind of it seemed to resonate with me because it's something that I've experienced not just through this trade, but other times in my life over the years, even if it's not something I made that immediate connection to until kind of for the purposes of this going through it. And it also ties in perfectly to what we've already discussed.
So it's a song that you keep coming back to sometimes during hard moments, not only during this time.
Um, I say go back to the album in general, and I think that they didn't clock the meaning until recently. But it's one of those things I think that has applied to lots of situations in my life where I've been through something that was quite a challenge for me, and then at the end of it, I've not necessarily changed, but I've um, like not changed my like worldview too much or anything, but changed how I approach certain things, and usually that is for the better.
This line is especially a metaphor of the phoenix. You're burning, and then from the flame you are reborn. And that was one of my questions, but you kind of answered that you changed from it, like you're back to the old you, but a different version, a bit of a changed version. And what changed
Hmm.
in you?
I it's hard to put it into words, but I guess I'd say I'm probably more, I guess, not, I wouldn't say overly hopeful, but I guess I've got a bit more, somewhat optimistic of like, I was with someone who I thought the absolute world of, and they felt the same about me. So it's sort of, if that's happened once, maybe that can happen again. Never say never. That kind of thing of being more optimistic
Hmm.
about what's on the horizon. I guess that's probably one of those things. And I guess with everything, you just get more resilience, and you know how to navigate these situations, and you have the wisdom of like knowing what's important and what is relevant. It also gives you kind of more insight into how things have gone previously, situations with other people, and kind of thinking, okay, maybe that's not what I would have handled it at the time, but with the knowledge I have now, I know if that comes up again, I know what I'm going to do, what that process is, how I'm going to handle it next time.
So is it also maybe less painful for you to look back at this relationship and see it as something good that has happened, even though it can be hard to think about it?
I'd say that was always a factor into it. It was, and I think that's part of why it was so hard, because it came after something that was just so pure and so just, I guess, just everything that I'd always wanted from a relationship, even if I didn't fully realize exactly what I wanted when I was compared
Hmm.
to how I was when I was 17 and now. That was definitely a factor of why it was so painful. But I always knew like that it was something that was special to me, and I was all eventually I would be able to see it more fun in that. And that's something again that comes up in our song Rumination. Like the last line of one of the last lines of the song is, in spite of like everything, I have no regrets, which basically means in spite of all the pain and everything that came as a result of it, like I don't regret giving this relationship a go at all.
I think that's also a good step of healing and to have no regret about it, because if you're still always having regrets or remorse, you're wondering, you're just playing it over and
Yeah,
over
yeah,
again in your
exactly. And I
head.
think that was part of the part of the thing as well. I think when going into this relationship, because we the distance was a fact, was something. It was a long distance thing, as I said earlier. It was one of those things where neither of us had seen it coming that we would even cross paths. I think we both said we wanted to see where things went, and we would have regretted not trying as much as it hurt when things end. We're both glad that we gave it a shot.
Coming back to Thursday, so they are an iconic emo band for I don't know which wave of emo, but I just know that they're an
I guess between second and third wave, I'm not fully looked into what the waves are. I guess because they were started they're
Mm-hmm.
playing shows in like 1998, which was obviously when like the big Midwest emo thing was happening. But they were very clearly part of like the start of the wave, which because obviously they
Yeah.
were a big part in My Chemical Romance's journey because of Jeff did their first album.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't even know that. You said that Jeff is one of your favorite lyricists. Do you have any other favorite lyrics of him?
Hmm. There's some really cool. I think the autobiography of a nation has some really cool lines, and it's also that other thing of like, in spite of the music being so emotional, it's also very political as well, which is something I've brought into my music to some degrees. And also
Mm-hmm.
another song of theirs that
Yeah.
resonated with me was one of their more recent ones because they started doing new music a couple of years ago. They did that song "Application from the Release of a Dream." It came out about I think almost a year after
Mm-hmm.
the breakup I'd been through. So, and that is a song that sounds quite, I guess for Thursday, it sounds a bit more of an optimistic song. I think some people have speculated it's about Jeff. It's Jeff talking about his journey of healing from addiction because that's like a big thing he went through when Thursday initially broke up. And it's one of those things. It kind of felt like the song that came out at the perfect time for me. It kind of felt like, okay, I'm kind of come to the end of this journey. This feels like a song about kind of keep going because there's a lot of things that like the big hook in that song is holding on to you, holding on for you. So it's kind of like, but I wouldn't say it's like holding on for a person. It's holding on for yourself. It's at least that's how I would interpret it. And I think it's also is there something calling out to me, which so the whole song just felt like the perfect song for me at that moment. I think funny enough that song came out around the time I was preparing to do Death of Youth again as well.
So it really feels like Thursday arrived or came back exactly at the right time for you.
Right time for me, and yeah, and maybe it played a part in the wanting to do Death of Youth again as well. So,
Mhm.
in some degree at least,
So thank you, Thursday, for bringing Death of Youth.
yeah. And also, they probably wouldn't. Death of Youth probably wouldn't even exist to begin with if Thursday didn't.
Yeah, probably because I guess they also inspired a lot of bands that inspired you.
Yeah,
It really
definitely.
comes.
Like Touche
Yeah.
Amore, like Jeremy from Touche,
Hmm.
he had the first ever Thursday fan site back when he was like 18 or so. And I think Jeff might have had he did guest vocals on their first album. He think he might have put out their first album on his label, but I could be completely wrong on that front.
I love to think about my favorite band, what they listen to, it, where
Yeah,
everything came from.
and my favorite band of all time is Funeral for a Friend, and I think their
Hmm.
old singer Matt, his favorite band was Boy Sets Fire, and I got into Boy Sets Fire because seeing how Matt talked about them, and I was like, wow, I should check out this band, and they ended up becoming one of my favorite bands as a result.
And I had also this feeling when recently I went to Landmark's show and Under Oath was opening for them. And that's no shade to Landmarks,
wow,
but it was crazy for me that Under Oath was opening for Landmarks. And so that's big for Landmarks and congrats on them. But for me, Under Oath is one of my favorite bands, but also one of the favorite band of my favorite bands. So that felt like a full circle moment too.
Yeah, I think a lot of the kind of like the emo hardcore kind of bands of this era are going to be influenced by the bands who listen to like Funeral for a Friend, Under Oath, Thursday, Thrice. So those bands are all, so it's like we're coming to that point now where we're being influenced by like the Touche Amores, by the La Disputes, which is crazy. It's even hard for me to comprehend that Stage 4 by Touche Amores is like 10 years old this year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. They're doing a tour to celebrate it.
Yeah, I'm going to Outbreak Festival in Manchester just for that. Well, there's other bands I want to see, but that was the main reason. Because that's the only UK date they're doing.
Oh, really? But yeah, the Outbreak Festival lineup is always crazy every year. It gets better and better even.
Yeah, but also I think Alexisonfire doing Crisis in Fall the same day, so it's going to be insane.
That is like, but yeah, because this year Crisis is turning 20 years old, which is even crazier.
Yes, I know. Yeah, and in July I'm going to see My Chemical Romance do the Black Parade.
Oh my god, I'm so jealous right now. What about Death of Youth? What's next for you guys?
At the time of like recording this, we're about to play our release show. That by the time this comes out, that will be done. So our next shows after that, we're doing a weekender in March with friends of ours, In Case You Leave, who I think you had on the podcast previously. So we're doing a small weekender with them in March, setting up Brighton, Eastbourne, and Folkestone. We've got another London show in April that hasn't been announced yet, but it's one I'm really excited about. It's back with a band that I absolutely adore. I'm really excited to be playing a show with them again because it's a band we played with before. And then we've got another weekender in May that hasn't been announced just yet, but hopefully we'll be announcing after we've wrapped up our March weekender.
So some exciting things coming.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll have our vinyl then, so we'll be able to sell those at the shows.
Rob, thank you very much. It was a very nice conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, same here. And as always, thank you for having me on.
For everyone listening, go listen to Death of Youth and their new album, Nothing Is the Same Anymore, wherever you listen to your music. Go follow them on Instagram to be updated on all their news. You can also follow me on Instagram at Into the Cave Pod. You can like, comment, subscribe, anything that helps. I will talk to you again next week with a new guest. Be kind to yourself. Bye.